A country seeking to restore democracy in more ways than one. Soldiers promise elections in Mali after overthrowing the president, while mediators aim to reinstate him as the rightful leader. I'm Ali Aslan, and today's newsmaker is Mali's military coup. The military junta has taken over Mali after soldiers detained President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita last week. The coup was condemned worldwide, but it was celebrated inside the country, where protesters had been calling for Keita's downfall for months. The soldiers have pledged to restore democracy and oversee a transition to new elections. Meanwhile, mediators from West Africa's regional bloc have met the coup leaders, demanding that President Keita be returned to power. The soldiers say that is out of the question. While negotiations are underway, is Mali at risk of plunging into a full-blown crisis that could be exploited by armed fighters? Adam Pletz has more.
A convoy of soldiers on their way to Mali's presidential palace, where they detained President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita and other officials at gunpoint. Keita later resigned live on television, saying he didn't want any bloodshed on his behalf. And now power rests with the military junta. One of its first moves was to meet with civil servants.
My name is Colonel Assimi Goita, chairman of the National Committee for the Salvation of the People. It was my duty to meet with the various secretary generals so that together we could assure them of our support for the continuity of the services and the state.
Like the leader of Mali's last coup in 2012, Goita received military training from the US, which now says it's reviewing all assistance. The soldiers say they will hold fair elections within a reasonable time frame, and on the capital streets, they've been met with wild celebrations from protesters who for months have been calling for Keita's resignation, accusing him of mismanaging the economy and electoral fraud. In the last 3 months, at least 14 people have been killed in the unrest. And that against a background of ethnic tensions, attacks, and an insurgency.
The whole of Mali has been liberated by a Republican force. The Malian people support them from above and from below. We are really very, very happy. There is no education, there is no health, there is no security. Everything has been told to the man. He does not want to listen to his people.
Mali's opposition M5 RFP movement says it was unaware of any coup plans, but its leaders have been quick to side with the junta.
We thank our children in uniform for the work they have done.
But the international community has reacted with almost unanimous condemnation. The Economic Community of West African States has suspended Mali's membership, closed its borders, cut off all financial flows, and activated a standby military force.
Nous allons donc engager des discussions avec les responsables de la junte militaire pour leur porter le message de notre communauté et leur faire comprendre que le temps de prise de pouvoir par la force est révolu dans notre sous-région.
ECOWAS is concerned that the coup could affect the fight against terrorism in the region. Mali is home to UN and EU peacekeeping missions, as well as regional and French troop deployments, and US and UK air assets. But even given the extent of its presence, can the international community actually do anything to reinstate Keita? And could the coup affect the fight against terrorism in one of the world's most unstable regions? Adam Pletz, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, let's go to our panel. Joining me now from Mali's capital is Samake. He's a former presidential candidate and Malian ambassador to India. Also in Bamako is journalist Mohamed Salaha. He's the director at Le Mali magazine. And Andrew Lebovich joins us from New York. He's a policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations and specializes in Africa. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Yeah, the military coup leaders have arrested President Keita and Prime Minister Cisse. Was that the right move?
Well, no, I wouldn't say it was the right move, but it has been done. it is important to understand that this arrest was made possible because of the popular appraisal that the Malian people in a movement called July 5th movement demanded that the president resign. And because of this movement, the military was able to finalize the popular demand for the resignation of the president. So in that respect, they helped the work of the people of Mali. Having said that, we have never been in favor of a military coup. We have condemned the coup, but beyond the condemnation, we have to move to what can happen. What is Mali's future? What can we do now? And that's the question we are asking as political leaders in this country. So I am part of the movement, the M5, that has been calling for the resignation of Ibeka. Any solution for me is better than Ibeka remaining in power.
Interesting. Mohamed, Keita, of course, won a second term in 2018, but the military coup was preceded by months-long protests against him for corruption allegations, mismanagement of economy, even election frauds. Is it safe to say that the people in Mali and of Mali support this coup?
What we can say is that protests were on in the country more than 1 month. And most of the people are denouncing the bad governance, corruption, and also especially corruption inside army. So all those things came together, and M5 RFP, led by Mahmoud Diko, who is a cleric, called for the resignation of the president. When I say most of people, I mean Malian people who are in the streets, the protests. So it represents a part of the people, but not the whole people of Mali. So this is the work they were doing until this coup. When military came, they took the power. So it's the president didn't resign himself. He was forced to resign. In a normal situation, the president will never be inside a barrack in Kati and pronounce a discourse pronounce a speech showing his resignation. So it's a normal situation. It's a coup.
Clearly a very murky situation. Andrew, now the military coup leaders are talking to opposition politicians about appointing a transitional government, appointing a presidential president. What do you make of this move?
Well, I think the military leadership, or the leadership behind the junta, seem to know very clearly that they have to move towards some sort of a transitional government and some sort of a civilian government in order to have international legitimacy and in order to, in some way, maintain their legitimacy within Mali. The question that's really being discussed right now, and that is proving, I think, difficult to resolve for negotiations, particularly with ECOWAS, is how long this transition will last, and if the transition will be headed by a civilian or by another member of the military. And that seems to be at least one of the sticking points for right now.
Let me stay on the point, Andrew, just one more time, because obviously this coup has sparked global condemnation. At the end of the day, the European Community of West African States, the African Union, the EU, UN, they've all asked for Keita to be reinstated. Do you think these condemnations are having any effects and any impacts on the coup leaders?
Well, we should clarify first that not everyone is calling for Ibeka's restoration. In ECOWAS, this is particularly prominent among ECOWAS's demands, but even there, within ECOWAS, some people are moving away from this. I think it's very clear that Ibeka is not going to come back to power. But the condemnation certainly, and the imposition of sanctions, even if they're relatively ineffectual from ECOWAS, have shown that this pressure continues and that there is this continued push for a move toward a transitional government. But for right now, at least, as I said, it seems that the junta is holding fairly firm and using their negotiating position to really push back against ECOWAS.
Yeah, what do you make of the international condemnations? Can the international community actually do anything to reinstate Keita at this particular point, or is just lip service?
I am saying that it is absolutely impossible for President Keita to return to power. This will be against the will of the people. Returning to a President Keita will be returning to chaos, will be returning to what we have been living here in Mali, which is the suffering of the people. As you've known, Ibeka and his regime have totally failed to provide security, to provide education. This is the first time in the history of our country that we've been 2 months without a government. So we are very surprised, and we invite the international community to reconsider their position, because it is in the best interest of the people of Mali, it is in the best interest of the international community, especially the regional organization, that we have a stable Mali, and Ibeka has failed to provide a stable Mali. So we should look into the new perspective. How do we create a new Mali with the potential of contributing to the fight against terrorism, but also a Mali capable of providing the basic needs of its people? Ibeka failed to do so. We cannot go back to that solution that has already failed.
Well, thanks so much to Mohamed Salaha for joining us. And let's bring in Thamsanqa Zhou now. He has advised European governments on African policy, and he joins us from London. Thamsanga, we talked about the international condemnation to the coup. We, of course, talked about the plan on the part of the military coup leaders now to appoint a transitional government. What do you make of the entire situation right now in Mali?
Well, the situation in Mali has to be looked at different layers. The first layer you want to look at is the history of West Africa in having coup d'etats, and whether this is actually one of them, or is one that can be seen in the context of what has happened in the past, where military people walk into the presidential palace, promise that there will be a civilian government, and then remove the uniform and then just take over themselves, this time under civilian clothes. It's difficult to actually say that. The second is, are the international communities looking at this as a template that comes from what you call Zim November? Is this something that happened to Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe, where the military technically moved in, but allowed the constitution of the country to continue, allowed civilian leadership to continue? But it was very clear that Robert Mugabe was not given an opportunity to continue.
Right.
So in this case, was Ibeka not given that opportunity? So I think when you listen to Salak and others that want stability in Mali, the question is, should it be the interest of the Malian people or the interest of the international community, those worried about terrorism that can get space if Mali or Bamako is unstable? So it's going to be a bit difficult.
Andrew, do you think that this coup reflects the will, the wishes on the parts of the people of Mali?
Well, there's certainly no uniform Malian opinion. It's clear that the coup was received with some popular support, as has been pointed out by other guests. This is built on months of protests and even a longer period of discontent and growing opposition to Ibeka's rule. So there is some popular support for the coup, but we shouldn't assume that it's uniform or even necessarily a majority of Malians. We have to be very careful about how we talk about diversity of opinion in Mali.
Indeed, but unfortunately, Mali is no stranger to military coups. As a matter of fact, the last one just took place in 2012. And a lot of people, Andrew, are concerned that this coup could affect the fight against insurgents in northern Mali, just as it did back in 2012. What's your assessment?
I think it's possible. It's important to remember that the coup leaders, one of their first steps was actually to state publicly that they wanted to honor and continue all of Mali's international relationships, including with French forces in the region, and including, of course, with the UN and the UN peacekeeping force in Mali. For right now, we haven't seen the kind of collapse that accompanied the coup in 2012, which is a positive sign. But of course, attacks have also continued even during this time, including with, unfortunately, with the deaths of Malian soldiers.
So it remains an incredibly serious security situation, and that's not improving anytime soon, unfortunately. But it is at least a good sign that we haven't seen the kind of collapse of the military presence in northern Mali in particular that accompanied the 2012 coup.
Yeah, the country of Mali, of course, is you attempted to become president of Mali. Obviously, you're very heavily invested in this and have a vision for the country. If it were up to you, what does Mali need at this particular point? The country has gone through so much in previous years. What does Mali need first and foremost in order to become a stable country?
First and foremost, we need to remove all the sanctions on a country that is seeking to get stabilization. We need not worry about the negative impact of the international community of what is going on in Mali. Now, first and foremost, we need a civilian leadership. We need a civilian transition to be able to go forth with the reforms that are necessary for a better electoral system. And that has been requested recently during a national inclusive dialogue that made recommendation to President Keita, and he again failed to implement. So we have in Mali what it takes through public discussion, public debate. We have come with some recommendations that will help us move Mali forward and be able to resolve the security issues, but also the economic development in the country. So it's very unfortunate that we are living today. The worst case scenario today is the international community, especially the regional communities, levying sanctions against Mali. This is not the time for it. This is the time to look into perspectives. How do we move forward? How do we make sure that the military transfer the power in the very short term to the civilian transition that will organize the upcoming elections in Mali?
Right, Thamsanga, and it is true, of course, that it's been mentioned UN and EU peacekeeping missions are taking place in Mali. The French, of course, France, the former colonial power of Mali, is heavily invested and has a great deal of interest in the country. Do you think Mali would be better off if all, if you will, foreign elements would withdraw from the country and leave the country to its own devices to settle things?
I think from a security point of view, that is not possible because Mali, it does not have that military capacity to look after the interests of the security interests of that region. Secondly, Mali also has the responsibility to ECOWAS, the Sahel, all the other people who also want or expect Mali to rise up to the plate or the game, as it were. So I can foresee a scenario where even when the Americans say they will not train people, or France, begins to question and losing soldiers, that they will stay in the region. But I think there's a wider question. What you're asking is a wider question that we are discussing within the African diaspora context. Where does Africa go? I mean, I listened to Samake. What does a future Mali, even if Ibika is removed, what does that future Mali look like? What is it a democratic space where a president is elected free and fairly, but fails to deliver for the local people? Or you can have a dictator who delivers for the local people? What is it that Africa needs? What is that self-sufficiency, whether it's militarily, economically, or socially, or otherwise? When we say Africa has been able to be fully independent and they can make their own decisions without external forces or external interests, what does that look like? Right. I mean, the only example at the moment we have is Rwanda. Probably Tanzania is trying to head that direction. Zimbabwe tried that, but struggled. People like Sankara tried that. In Burkina Faso, they struggled. So what does Africa really want? Even if he goes, you have new elections. Because remember, Ali, Ibika himself is a transition president, right, post-2012. So he was supposed to just do something to stabilize Mali and hand over to the next generation. But that hasn't actually happened.
Right, Thamsanga, and you raised the most important question, of course, Andrew. How does a future Mali? What should a future Mali look like? How do you think this is going to play out? Any chance for Keita and his Prime Minister Cisse to be reinstated, or you think we just should move now? The international community should start focusing on the transitional government?
Well, it's not really for me to say, since I'm not Mali, and this is going to be decisions.
No, but your prediction, not your wish, but your prediction.
Of course. I don't think there's really any chance that Ibeka is on his way back to power. Other members of his government might find their way back in, but it seems very clear that we're going to be moving toward some sort of a transitional government with enormous pressure, probably from the international community, to have elections. I think we should be careful about that. It's very important to move towards civilian rule, but we should ask the question of what will civilian rule accomplish, what will elections accomplish, and make sure that at least for the international community, we're not moving quickly toward elections for the sake of elections, but that we move toward a kind of governance that can respond to the needs of Malians. And that's going to be really the difficult situation to resolve at this point.
Yeah, it goes without saying that the well-being of your country is very dear to you. How do you think this scenario is going to play out in the coming days and weeks?
As I said, in Mali, we do have already a framework of providing ideas ourselves. We had this national dialogue where we made it sure that our biggest challenge in this country is, our urgent matter is security, but corruption is the root cause of all of our failures. So we have to make sure that we have leaders that is responsive to the people. And that is one of my concerns. Militaries are not responsive to the needs of the people. They're not responsive to the popular pressure as an elected official. So I will urge for a quick return to elected officials and a constitutional order in Mali without Ibeka and its previous government members. We need to turn the page of the old leadership, the traditional leadership that has failed the people of Mali. We need to innovate. We need to move forward and making sure that politicians and political leaders are responsive to the need of the people and can be removed from office. What we're doing, as I stated before, the Article 35 of human rights provides leaders, whether elected or not, violate the rules, violate the Constitution. It is a duty for the people to stand up and request them to step down. And that is what has happened in Mali. And we don't want this to be thrown into the lingo or the language of mutiny or coup d'etat. Mali deserves better, and we have fought as a people. We have organized ourselves to combat ill governance, to combat corruption that was represented by Ibeka. And today, we invite the community, the international community, to look for internal solution in Mali. We have ideas. We have political clouds that will allow us to be able to implement this recommendation that were made by the people of Mali. So it will be a good starting point. This is a good turn for the people of Mali,
right, towards
transparency, toward good governance, and to make sure that elections are held in a fair and transparent way. So that's my invitation to the coup leader.
Right.
They should promptly look into transferring the power to the civilian people and making sure that the old guard that has failed, that failed policy does not come back again to Mali.
Good governance and swift transition to a civilian government in Mali is needed. We need to turn a new page, says Samake. Thank you so much out there to Andrew, Mohamed, Thamsanga, and for their insights on this topic, on our newsmakers of the day, the military coup in Mali. And thank you out there for watching, and hope to see you again next time for a new edition of Newsmakers.